Hey everybody, Michael Francis Lott here. Welcome to another Harmonious podcast episode. I'm here with author Peter Wells, and we're discussing his book, Notes from the West Pole, Creating a Harmonious Life in an Adversarial Culture. And today we're going to be looking at the chapter of his book called The Inner Person.
The inner person is our priority, not the outside authority, not the judge, not the commander-in-chief, nor the medical expert. The treatment is from within. Even the madman murderer must be understood by himself before change is possible. Murdering the murderer continues the madness. The path of each person is valid. Each living thing is on its own course, moved by an inner intelligence. If we can honor this intelligence within each person, our conflicts and self-destructive behavior will be diminished. The only vehicle we have is the person. Nothing less, nothing more. The people is an idea in the mind of a person. If we are to devise a more harmonious way of life, it must benefit the person. We are all here together, a particular species, evolving through birth and death on this spinning orb, which even now is zipping through the heavens with all of us aboard. We are in fact sharing this earth and totally contained within it. What are we doing here? What's going on? If we could watch a time-lapse film of the planet over the past century, we would see huge cities erupting with an exploding humanity, great chains of mechanized energy, and newborn millions of people suddenly rushing around the world. We would see wars, like cancers on the body of humanity, a global skin disease of human self-destruction exploding before our eyes. What is this strange disease we suffer which destroys our lives? What kind of confusion is it that sets person against person and nation against nation, not just in argument, but with atrocities to the death? Why can't the children of Abraham share their resources and work together for their mutual benefit? And why do we habitually choose to kill and maim each other? Is this the same confusion that sets the cells of the human body against each other? We say, of course, that a healthy human body does not have cancer. But do we say that a healthy human society does not have wars? Not yet. We're still defending ourselves with a vengeance.
So this piece starts off talking about how the inner person is the priority, not the outside authority. And the thing that this really brings to my mind initially upon hearing that phrase is it reminds me of the work of Carl Jung. Are you familiar with Carl Jung?
Yes, of course. The collected unconscious.
Yeah. And, the basis of his work was revolved around this process that he called the process of individuation, where he basically said that the entire purpose of one's life was to embody one's inner self, to embody one's inner authenticity, and that all of our experiences, all of our relationships were part of this giant unconscious process to individuate and to embody that. So that's really the first sort of thing that comes into my mind upon hearing that phrase. So,
right.
Can you go into this what is this inner person? What is that?
The inner person is, in effect, the source of this being that each of us is. Now, we know very, very little about that. Science is investigating it, exploring it, but like the human brain is not known to science. It's sort of being explored right now. So the inner person is a part of the being that has existed forever. and now is in this form. And this form is as a person in this society. So as we deal with coming alive and growing up in this culture, we're fed all kinds of teachings, all kinds of positions to take. Have to obey this idea, we have to obey that one. We can be punished, we can be abused. And we sort of include everything that has happened to us, and we build an identity that is individuated, but it's an identity that's based on our experiences. The point that I'm looking to make is the idea that this inner being, this inner person who has probably been called selfish and self-involved, is actually trying to exist in this cacophony of rules and regulations and requirements. And so giving credibility and power to that inner person in each of us is to really tie us back to the source of the life energy that we're living.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And one of the ways that I kind of see it is that, with the identity that you talk about building with the culture, I consider that to be like the false self, and we have a false self that's kind of like a front. It's how we relate to the culture. And then we have a true self that is the purest expression of our soul. And I kind of see it as like the false self is like this cocoon or this chrysalis that sort of shrouds the soul, and the soul gradually goes through a process of breaking out of that chrysalis, of that cocoon, and really revealing its beauty and all of its glory. So I think we're all sort of in an unconscious process of going through that. Is that kind of how you see it too?
Yeah, I don't see it as false. I see it as a reality that in order to exist in this culture, this civilization, one has to have an identity. And that identity is evaluated and judged and leads to a career, to perhaps a family, a marriage. And this actual identity is not to be denied, even though it's been created to a large extent based on teachings that have been imposed on us that we may not actually honor deeply within ourselves. I think the whole process that we've talked about it in other chapters, is that we've been indoctrinated to connect to this culture, both whatever religion we have, whether it's Christian or Muslim or Jewish, we are indoctrinated. And then also we're indoctrinated with the powers that be, the authority and the law courts, the police, the judges, all of it. We have to create an identity that will adapt to these requirements. So I think at a certain point in our lives, we can kind of wake up to the fact that everything we've been digesting it meant well. Everybody who tried to teach us meant well, but the effect of it has been to cloud the whole being with ideas rather than the actualities of being alive. So we have a very busy mind judging and evaluating our existence, choices, decisions, all of that stuff, all based on this kind of fabricated self that is a reaction to the requirements of the culture. And at a certain point in our lives, we can, if we wake up, we can allow ourselves to just simply be this unfathomable, eternal being that we happen to be. That this life didn't begin with us. This life has been going on for millions, billions of years, and we're still the carrier of this amazing brain that has experienced all of that. So I see that that the inner person needs to be honored in our lives. We need to say, yeah, I am this. This is me. This is not my teaching. This is not what I've been told. This is who I actually am. And it takes a while to get to that place.
Yeah, I think it does take a while to get to that place. And I think really like that what we're talking about here is the precipice of evolution, of human evolution, and of how the universe wants to evolve through us. It wants us to embody our purest, most authentic expression. So I think if we really attune to that, it's not just a process we're going through on our own, but I think the whole cosmos is operating through us and on our side through that process as well. So, because I think there's a lot of fear that people come up against when going through that process of embodying one's truth.
Yeah, this truth has no other side. This truth is whole. And our culture has used division and multiplication as a method of indoctrinating us. So, but we can just be. And in this being is amazing, amazing stuff. I mean, this life is amazing. How did we get here? What are we doing here? Yes, okay, we are the outer form of this human existence, and we are mutating and evolving right in the moment with our response to it. Mm-hmm. This moment that we're in is a kind of an awakening from the teachings to your word, the authenticity of this self, this being, this soul.
Right.
And it has every reason to be here, reasons that we don't even know.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We can be ignorant and be this at the same time. Innocent, I guess, is a better word.
Yeah. Two sides of the same coin, ignorance and innocence.
Right. And the division that leads us into war, which is what a lot of this piece was about.
Right.
That division is completely unnecessary. Mm-hmm. However, we're required to deal with it because it's a fact. We are being bombed by ourselves. We are being killed by ourselves. And so we have this very, very difficult condition to survive because the human family is turned against itself. Mm-hmm. And it makes no sense to the individual person. So how does the individual person engage with that? That's our question, really. And the engagement has to come from the source, has to come from deep within. It isn't an outside power, it's an inside power.
So how do you relate to that conflict, to that disease, as you kind of said in the piece, of man killing man, of us destroying ourselves?
Well, we're evolving. And it's our job in this moment, what we're doing right now, we're talking about the evolution of our condition from being a warrior to being a harmonious being on this planet. And we do have the ability, how we do it is yet to be evolved, but we're here to live this life with an awake consciousness. And in that awakened consciousness, it's quite obvious that we don't want to self-destruct. So we have to reorganize so that we don't self-destruct. At the moment, there are millions of people around the world, billions, who believe that they have to fight, to struggle, to defeat others in order to exist. That's an old teaching. Mm-hmm. And it was true at certain times. When you were living in a tribal situation and the conqueror arrives and just wipes you out, you can't really deal with it in any other way than to get away. And in effect, what we're doing and what we need to do is to present a whole picture for the human family to live harmoniously. Very difficult. I'm not saying there's any one solution, except it's one person at a time.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that come up for me, as you say that, and one of them is, okay, so we're evolving. We need to develop a new model of relating socially to each other. And okay, so we do that. Let's say we create that. Well, within our DNA, we still have thousands upon thousands of years of genetic memory of us being traumatized and tormented. And so even if we developed a whole new social system of making the inner person the priority, we're still going to have people that are going to be apt to lash out and have this tendency to traumatize someone else due to their own ancestral traumas.
Well, I don't even know if that's ancestral. I think that's present. I think that kind of experience is available to just about everybody. We can all suffer at the hands of another authority or another person. But the change we're going through is something that we've been through before. We haven't always been warriors. We became warriors to suit the need. We lived an agrarian lifestyle for centuries, for eons. And yes, we were roving bands and we took what we could from wherever we could get it. But I don't think the understanding of war was fully expressed and organized as it is now. Now we have conflict organized as a fact of life, so that the mind is completely occupied with that fact. Now, so how do we get beyond that is we have to allow for the fact that that has happened to us. As a boy, I was in the Second World War, the London Blitz. I saw destruction of people, of buildings, of everything, and absolute misery, absolute suffering. And I wanted to shoot down the German planes. I was 4 or 5 years old, but I wanted to kill all the Germans that could possibly be killed, especially Hitler. Now, later in my life, that makes no sense whatsoever. I don't want to kill anybody. I want us all to actually enjoy this life. I want every single person to be fulfilled by their own way of life. And it doesn't mean putting us into positions of opposition. Well, we have to deal with a structure that is more or less compelling us to do that. But I think as a being, we can evolve beyond our institutions.
Well, let me ask you something here, because you did grow up in this, and you actually did have relatives. I believe your uncle was killed in the war, right?
And people down the street, people I knew.
So let me ask you now, as an adult, when you think about how your family and people that you loved were killed, does that spark a feeling of anger or vengeance, even the slightest, in you now?
No.
Really?
Not a bit. No, because it wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't make anything better. Any anger I have towards the Germans for bombing innocent people in London, we can see what an awful, tragic era it was. We can see that Hitler was mad. And we can also see another thing. We can see that people obeyed the tyrant and went into these battles against their own best interests. And in fact, against the best interests of their whole country. But they went into it because they were forced, more or less at gunpoint, to obey Hitler.
Right.
So that's one of our biggest problems is how do we relieve the individual person from the false authority, from the authority that is more intent on its own neuroses than it is on the value to the person. I mean, war, there's no value to the person in war.
Well, okay, I'm gonna ask kind of a deep question here. I'm really curious as to your response.
Okay.
Forgive me if this is a little too intense, but let's say that there was some crazy person living in your neighborhood and they murdered one of your children or your grandchildren. How would you respond to them?
Oh, of course, I'd be totally upset, totally miserable.
Would you want to seek vengeance?
No, because I don't believe it would provide me with anything. Whether or not I could forgive that person, I certainly couldn't forget. So, and obviously it ruins my life to a large extent. It becomes, I've lost a child as a result of this madman who has not had the ability to live well, is angry and has been suffering. And he, by some fluke of nature, has destroyed one of my children. I would never forget it. I would never be able to stop feeling it. However, the vengeance against the person who did it is not the point. The point is somehow to heal the problem that's in there. and that is widespread. It's not just in that one person. It's all over the place. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, of course, there are thousands and thousands of people who are preparing to do some kind of terrorism, some kind of mass murder. They've got the weapons, and they're planning in their bizarre way to do something that is absolutely horrendous. We won't stop that by vengeance. We have to heal it. And we have to bring it into focus so that we really look at it, and whoever is suffering from it has to be included. And in the system that we're using, we're showing the society that this is what happened, and this is what will happen if you do this. What will happen is you're going to be looked at very thoroughly. You're not necessarily going to be freed into jail. You're going to be exposed as a sick person, or as a person who needs some kind of treatment, or who needs to be healed. Now, if as a warrior, we expect to kill each other. So there's a lot of people walking around believing they're warriors.
So just I'm a little confused. So are you saying that in order to deal with a criminal or a murderer is like public shaming? Is that what you're...
No, I'm not talking shit. I'm talking about healing.
Okay.
I'm talking about let's look at the problem. Let's really look at it, and let's look at it in this person. Let's see what is happening, and if we're healing it, there's a possibility that we will heal it as a whole.
Right.
And the person who is listening to whatever we're doing, if it's a question of being, on media, is given a different response than vengeance. Most of these people who do the terrorism and the awful acts against killing children in school, for example,
right,
that anger that is in that person comes from a specific source within them. And the more we can expose that, the more we can look at it, the better off we are.
Yeah, and I think it's a fundamental, almost like algorithm of the human psyche, where if you were traumatized, then you're likely to re-traumatize and replay that. So we have to figure out how can we heal and soothe and integrate that original trauma. And I believe that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I think we evolve through our lives. And I think we make mistakes, and we see other mistakes and other painful, traumas that happen, and I think we learn from it. Now, if we're held into a military state of mind, perhaps we're in the military, then that's difficult to get out of that. But I think it's our nature to really want to live this life as well and as happily as possible. So if we can return to that as our objective, then the anger can be healed or dealt with. Even more important is the fact that we, with all these thousands of people with millions of weapons, we've got to somehow stop it. We can't stop it by vengeance. Retribution does not stop it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for this wonderful discussion, Peter. And we will see everyone next week on our Harmonious podcast series. If you're interested in staying updated with our work and following up with Peter's book, Notes from the West Pole, you can visit us at www.harmonious.com, and that is spelled Harmony Us with a Y. So until next time, have a great week, guys.